Why is Mr. Modi ignoring him on world platforms?
There is a clear
There
hesitation.
used to be Howdy Modi, Namaste Trump.
Trump.
Now he seems to be ignoring him, or he doesn't want to interact with him one-on-one.
There's a fear probably that it would lead to political
So you're saying
clash.
Prime Minister is fearful of Donald Trump. Why should an average Indian citizen be worried about what is happening in international politics? Can you ever trust Pakistan?
Pakistan can never be a reliable player.
Then
You have a history of Pakistan going back.
when we talk about talks and terror cannot go together, then why deal with Pakistan at all?
Abandoning an age-old friend, an all-weather friend like Russia, and now we are paying a premium for the same oil. Probably Russia would have continued selling oil at a discounted price otherwise.
That you're saying when it comes to two big superpowers of the world, United States and China, India is behaving covertly.
To some extent, yes. Particularly after Trump has come into office.
And don't you think when you openly make these statements, you're giving an alibi to a country like China that they can do whatever they wish to do with India, and then the state of India will not respond? There is a change, however. Mostly now foreign policy is looked at in terms of optics rather than something tangible that you bring to the ground. How far do you agree that Indian foreign policy is driven more by Instagram reels than the reality? I want to ask you about Trump. Is he a bully, and is there any hack to deal with this businessman?
See, Trump is a...
Chethan, I'm an admirer. For a long time, I have immensely valued your opinions on geopolitics, diplomacy, and today I want to discuss a host of issues with you and learn more about diplomacy from you, and hopefully the audience, those who are preparing for the civil services examination, would also benefit from your wisdom. But my first question is, why should an average Indian citizen be worried about what is happening in international politics? How does it impact an average Indian citizen?
Sarmad sir, first of all, thank you for the kind words. To answer your question, international relations is something which affects every aspect of daily life. You take the Iran war, for example, the blockade at Hormuz, the shoot up in energy prices. It is already reflecting in the prices on the market, or the shortage of supply affecting various establishments, affecting our day-to-day functioning. So international relations is something which has a direct impact on the day-to-day life of every citizen. So taking some interest in foreign policy, at least understanding a little bit of the nuances, can play a big role, because this could help shape the debate in the country, build the political narrative, and eventually push the parties, the government in power as well, to focus on these issues. At the end of the day, international relations is about protecting and promoting the national interests of the country. And these national interests could be economic, it could be the social interests of the nation, and they're all directly connected. Domestic developments influence your foreign developments and vice versa as well. So that's what makes international politics very, very crucial in today's world especially. And today we are living in one of the most chaotic phases probably, with all the conflicts, with all the conservative ideologies spreading across the world. I think it's all the more important for India to take a firm stand to protect its core interests. And that's what makes this subject very, very crucial.
When you look at internal politics, for example, political parties, they may have different views on economy, on migration, illegal migration. But when it comes to foreign policy, don't you think that there is always a continuity? Whether it is UPA, NDA, more or less, there is a continuum with which the foreign policy is viewed in India. Would you agree or no?
In the context of India, yes, absolutely. Because there are other countries where foreign policy often takes a complete U-turn with change in governments. But in the case of India, more or less, irrespective of the party in power or the coalition in power, the foreign policy priorities have remained quite consistent. Take the Palestine question, for example. Though the Modi government is perceived to be closer to Israel, we still have maintained that ideological support for Palestine. And you see this with most of the issues where, let's say, with regard to our issues with Pakistan, opposition parties often close ranks and they come together. We saw how Dr. Shashi Tharoor from the opposition stood with the government during Operation Sindoor. So this has been an integral part of our foreign policy. And I think credit should be given to our political establishment and the ethos of our foreign policy, the foundational principles that were laid since the times of Nehru. So irrespective of the leadership or the party in power, I think this continuum is something we get to see in our foreign policy. And that serves our national interests as well.
There is a change, however. Mostly now foreign policy is looked at in terms of optics rather than something tangible that you bring to the ground. Uh, how far do you agree that Indian foreign policy is driven more by Instagram reels than the reality?
I think partially this is true, the assessment, because I think today we live in a generation of a crowd which is driven by social media, where most of the information we get is primarily through social media reels and shorts. And this reflects not only in politics, it reflects in diplomacy as well, where you have the foreign policy establishment catering to the larger audience. I wouldn't say it's entirely wrong per se, but the problem with this is people may not develop the required nuanced narrative that is required. They might develop a very superficial understanding. Like how, for example, India's foreign minister, Dr. Jaishankar, he has been projected as a cult figure, a personality driven foreign policy that is never suited for national interests. You need a more institution driven foreign policy where it is not dependent on one individual or one leader. And this had been maintained prior, let's say before 2014. I know I might get a lot of hate for saying this, but delivering these statements just on social media, which goes viral, alone may not achieve tangible outcomes in foreign policy. Uh, Many experts they say that India has become more visible because of all the optics. But are we really influential? Are we able to shape global events? That is where hard questions come up. Take for example, we haven't followed a very consistent approach with regard to Russia and United States. Initially, we tried taking a middle stand with regard to the Ukraine war. We ignored the Western sanctions, bought Russian oil. But all of a sudden, we made a U turn. Once Trump was about to enter into office, we started cutting down oil procurement from Russia. And now, with the Iran war, again, we have gone back to Russia. I understand it's a policy of diversification, but where is the long term predictability in your foreign policy? Are you really able to shape events happening in your extended neighborhood? Our involvement in West Asia has been bare minimum. We couldn't even take a stand when US blatantly attacked a Iranian warship. Though it was not in Indian waters, it was in international waters. But still, we say Indian Ocean is our strategic backyard. This is our primary area of influence. Would US stay silent if there was a similar external interference in their backyard, in the Western Hemisphere? But shockingly, from India, there was not a single statement that was made. So that's where some concern comes up that are we really playing to the larger crowd? But in today's world, it is necessary. But at the same time, I think there should be more focus on the tangible outcomes which have to be achieved.
We'll talk about all these issues one by one. But is India a Vishwa Guru, or this is a work in progress, or this is an illusion that we may never be able to achieve?
I think this is a work in progress. Uh, Being a Vishwaguru and providing that leadership, that vision to the global community, this is part of our civilizational ethos as well. Since ancient times, India has been that guiding light for the global community. So,
How?
take for example how India became the source for most of the key commodities since ancient medieval times, or how India exported ideology, religious ideology, the influence of Buddhism across Asian countries, or the uniquely moderate strand of Islam that has developed in South Asian subcontinent, and the close culinary connections that we share with across the world. So that soft influence of India has always been present. And India has been that influence from the Romans towards, let's say, the Srivijaya Empire in Indonesia. So India has always maintained that far-reaching influence, be it in society, in culture, etc. But right now, the Modi government's approach of branding India as a Vishwaguru, it has worked partially well, particularly with regard to Global South. We have re-envisioned India's leadership role, primarily standing for issues of, let's say, African countries or Latin American countries, hosting the Voice of Global South Summit, and giving a voice for these underdeveloped nations at G20 when we hosted the G20 in 2023. So these are clear signs from India that we can play that role as a middle power to bring the developing underdeveloped world together. And you can see how India provides assistance as well, disaster management assistance from Venezuela to, let's say, Turkey or our neighbors, Sri Lanka, for example. So India has been positioning itself well in that regard. But yes, there's a lot more to do. Just by claiming yourself to be a Vishwaguru, you may not be able to really influence these
But
events.
how is that helping India? For example, you spoke about assistance given to Turkey when there was an earthquake. But before that, provocative statements were made by the Turkish administration with regards to the Kashmir issue. And then We supported Turkey, and then Turkey supported Pakistan during Operation Sindoor, and that is no open secret. What are we getting in return?
Maybe it was India's hope to correct Turkey's position, because under Recep Erdogan, Turkey has been projecting itself as a leader of the Muslim world. It has different set of priorities, which goes against Indian interests. Maybe India's approach was to reach out to Turkey, show a friendly gesture on humanitarian grounds. But now I think India feels a sense of betrayal from Turkey as well. Our relations are at the lowest point in the last few years. As you said, we saw that during Operation Sindoor as well. Be it even with Bangladesh and Maldives, Turkey has been engaging with them, which goes against Indian interests. So, despite what others do, I think India's approach to help on humanitarian grounds that positions India as a principled power. When we, let's say, push these issues at United Nations, when we take up human rights issues. So, branding India as a Vishwa Guru gives us that weightage that is required, where we can possibly push against countries like Turkey or sometimes even United States. That space and flexibility gets created, and I think that's what matters in diplomacy.
So you're saying that this is more to do with our civilizational ethos rather than getting something in return. So this is our principled stand
Yeah.
that we take on issues. Why did we not take a principled stand on Russia-Ukraine conflict when the world was asking India to stop oil imports? Was it economic realism playing its role, or was it our ideological import?
In 2022, when the war started and when the sanctions were stepped up against Russia, it was a very pragmatic decision that India took, that we will not follow any unilateral sanctions, which has been our principal position from a long time. But I find one stand from the Modi government very troubling. There is a lot of inconsistency when it comes to unilateral sanctions. For example, take the sanctions against Iran and Venezuela in 2018 and 2019. India was forced by the Trump administration to zero out oil imports. And this severely compromised our ties with Iran. Iran has always been a strategic partner. Whereas with Russia, we took a pragmatic stand, which is much appreciated. It was required not just to maintain our age old friendship, but also to secure cheaper oil supplies. Russia was more than willing to provide discounted oil at that point of time. But now, when you look at the policy reversals which has happened, uh, the moment Trump was about to enter office, we started cutting down oil supplies. Yes, I understand that US is a superior economic power. It can significantly cause economic harm. But abandoning an age-old friend, an all-weather friend like Russia, and now we are paying a premium for the same oil. Probably Russia would have continued selling oil at a discounted price otherwise. So this inconsistency that we see, where we are principled in some places and where we don't take a principled position, or sometimes we are realistic and we brag about it as well, but sometimes we are not. And that, I think, that inconsistency is something which raises difficult questions about our foreign policy.
Is it hurting us?
In some ways, yes. Take, for example, Trump's statements when he deports Indians. Could be illegal migrants, but handcuffing them, sending them back as criminals. And India doesn't say a word about it. What does this say about the government? How are you then protecting your interests, the interests of your
How
citizens
is
abroad?
the current government's response different from the previous governments?
Previously, at least, there were moments where India would take a stand irrespective of the consequences. We saw this under P.V. Narasimha Rao. We saw this under Indira Gandhi. We saw this under Atal Bihari Vajpayee, where national pride at a certain point becomes important than your economic cost. Right now, I think the government is too driven just by the economic interests that US can punish India more severely. And at the cost of that, we are compromising national pride and national identity. When Trump calls India as a hellhole, and there's not a single statement coming out from India, when he levies tariffs, despite India being a key strategic partner, what message does it send? And I think that's where we need to take a lesson from European leaders. You look at Emmanuel Macron or Melanie, though they have maintained that partnership with the US and friendship with Trump, they have at times expressed their opposition as well. We saw the
And
recent
why do you think the government is not doing that? Primarily because of the economic interest at stake?
economic interests and also
Why
political.
does India appear weaker when it comes to United States?
I think it's about the political cost. Trump can cause significant damage to the persona that, let's say, Jaishankar or Modi have built for
How?
themselves.
We celebrated the return of Donald Trump with the hope that now relations between the two countries would be rock solid and would advance. But what we saw in return was United States getting closer to the field marshal, self-proclaimed field marshal of Pakistan.
I think this had to do with the short-sightedness of the Indian foreign policy establishment as well. Because during Trump's first presidency, we had seen signs of this. I mean, this is not completely new. We are just seeing a scaled-up version of Donald Trump and his erratic, mad behavior. Even during the first term, we saw such signs which were very evident that he is very transactional. He's someone who likes his ego to be pleased. And probably India lost its opportunities at the start of Trump's second administration itself. When the tariff war began, I think that's where India should have taken a firm stand. You need to generally engage in tit for tat tariffs. That's the norm in diplomacy. You get what you provide for. But when India was on the back foot and each time appearing apologetic instead of taking a defensive stand, I think each time we gave more space for Trump to be more aggressive against India. I think that has gone against Indian interests. For example, when he claimed his role in the ceasefire, uh, though India rejected the American involvement, I think we should have done a lot more to counter the Pakistani narrative, to counter the American narrative, which we didn't do.
We did. We vehemently rejected the argument presented by Donald Trump. We said that the ceasefire was initiated at the request of the
Of the
DGMO from
DGMO level.
Pakistan. We sent our politicians, members of the parliament, to different parts of the world to explain India's position. What else could the government of India have done?
Shaping the global media narrative was very critical. If you look at the period
But the world
during,
media has always been biased against India.
this is the shortcoming of our foreign policy as well. Look at the kind of support that China gave to Pakistan in shaping the media narrative, in shaping the social media narrative. And what is stopping India from engaging with Western media? Right? Yes, Western media has been biased, particularly, let's say, New York Times, Washington Post. But why haven't we cultivated, let's say, media sources, journalists across the
Why
world?
has Pakistan been successful in this and not India?
I think Pakistan has less to lose. Pakistan is a state, it's a client state. It can literally sell itself, as Jaishankar himself pointed out. They will go to any extent to achieve the interests of the deep state, the military establishment. And I think this is where India misread Asim Munir as well. I mean, now in retrospect, it's easy to connect the dots. Pahalgam attack was probably designed with this intention to propel Asim Munir, to unite the political support behind the military establishment. And Pakistan had been isolated from Washington and White House for almost 8 years. And now Asim Munir is back. He has won the favor of Donald Trump. And I think this is where India got it wrong. India should have engaged with Trump at the same time and took a firm stand against his statements with regard to India.
So, how should we have cultivated the foreign media and shifted the narrative in our favor? While at the same time, you're saying that Pakistan can do anything to cultivate the foreign media. What different could we have done?
For example,
Is it that
post
our foreign missions are understaffed? We need to recruit more foreign service officers.
this has been one chronic problem with our diplomatic establishment. The number of IFS recruits are way, way lower than even other small countries. Singapore has more diplomats than India. Definitely, your diplomatic strength plays a big role. And apart from that, investing in foreign media. For example, how Russia has cultivated, or US, or how they did during Cold War, through covert methods, where you pay off media houses, you invest in journalists, you create, basically influencer culture is not new. This has been used in
Or honey
geopolitics.
trap journalists.
This has been used from a very long time, and India has not done that. But one good sign is in the last 1 year, India has been focusing on recruiting a new batch of officers, specifically in the field of media and communication. And most likely, they'll be posted within the Ministry of External Affairs to be sent across diplomatic missions to engage with foreign media outlets. I think it's better late than never. Probably we should have done it earlier, but at least now we have made a beginning.
So initially, you were talking about India's influence, the soft power, the spread of Buddhism in Southeast Asian countries, the religious doctrines as well. What led to the downfall of this soft power? Is it only because of colonialism or something more than what meets an eye?
I don't agree with that. I don't think Indian soft power ever had a downfall as such. Maybe post in the neo-colonial world order, maybe it was not prioritized as much. Maybe the world wasn't aware as much as it should have been. But Indian foreign policy has always relied on these soft power tools, being the Hindu linkages, the Buddhist linkages, the age-old maritime trade linkages with East Africa, for example. But yes, we are seeing a more aggressive push on that front. It all started probably in the last 20, 25 years. But I don't see that Indian soft power had ever seen a downfall as such. Do you feel
But
that?
why are we not getting anything in return? I mean, have we shaped the Gaza conflict? Have we had an important role to play in stabilizing the relations between Russia and Ukraine? Have we received a permanent seat on United Nations Security Council? What has been the tangible outcome of this softer diplomacy over the past 75 years?
Okay, first let's look at the positive outcomes and then we'll come to India's failures as well. For example, if you look at how India has been able to secure trade access, one counterbalance strategy with regard to Trump's tariff war has been for India to expand the markets, diversify our trade. Look at all the FTAs we have signed uh, in the last, let's say, 4 years. Multiple FTAs with UAE, with Australia, with United Kingdom, with European Union. Of course, those FTAs will take full effect in some time. It also depends on whether you can fully utilize the potential of the trade agreement. But India has been doing its bit to
But
find new.
critics argue none of these FTAs have ever worked in favor of India.
Not really. The FTA with United Arab Emirates, FTA with Australia has done very well. The trade with UAE has more than doubled in volume. We have achieved some of the targets much before the deadline. And now we have
So is it export to UAE or import
both
from UAE?
export and import both.
What's more, imports or exports?
With UAE, sometimes we do have a trade surplus, but given the energy supplies, we do develop a deficit. But labor-intensive sectors have really benefited, like let's say textiles or let's say furniture, leather. There's a big demand for
But
that.
on textiles, we are losing to Vietnam and Bangladesh.
No, India has been a very competitive power. Yes, we have a stiff competition from Vietnam and Bangladesh, but India has done pretty well. Trade with UAE has really flourished because of the FTA. There were previously mistakes with the India-ASEAN FTA. It was very poorly negotiated. For example, it didn't have the rules of origin requirement, which was widely misused by Chinese traders. They would flood Indian market through the ASEAN route. And this was the mistake in India's negotiations under the then UPA government. And now the Modi government has pushed the ASEAN countries to review. And this itself is a big achievement. I'll tell you why. Because India-ASEAN FTA had no review clause. ASEAN could have stuck to its ground saying, you never agreed to a review clause, so we'll not review it. But India has been able to leverage that influence. And now ASEAN is in the process of reviewing the FTA. So we are plugging those gaps. We have learned those lessons. And now when you look at FTAs with Australia, New Zealand, those lessons we drew from the failure of ASEAN FTA have been implemented here, creating more opportunities for Indian services sector. That is our strength, which was missing with the India-ASEAN FTA, or creating more options for mobility for Indian students, Indian professionals. The inclusion of Ayush practitioners in, let's say, New Zealand and Europe. They're willing to accept Ayush practitioners from India. That creates numerous opportunities for us.
But because of England and New Zealand FTA, flooding of agricultural products, dairy products, don't you think that it's going to affect negatively our farmers?
No, India has always ensured that sensitive sectors are protected. In fact, that was the prime reason why we exited the RCEP, which is the world's largest FTA led by China. Since we didn't get guarantees on protecting, let's say, agriculture, MSME, dairy. But in all the new FTAs we have signed, if you go through the clauses, there are very clear barriers. The trade barriers have been retained, be it with European Union, be it with UK, be it with EFTA countries, or with New Zealand, because these countries have a big strength in dairy, animal husbandry. India has safeguarded these sectors. And beyond that, we have created more opportunities for labor-intensive sectors.
But the customs on dairy products have reduced massively.
Not to the extent where the imports would pose a threat to domestic production.
It may.
No, I don't think so. It never would. The tariffs remain pretty high. For example, if you take India-New Zealand FTA, the tariffs for dairy is in the range of 15% and above, which will never give them the competitive edge or advantage with Indian dairy products. So in that regard, Indian agriculture is pretty safe. The FTAs will not directly pose a immediate threat for domestic production.
So these are the highlights of our foreign policy.
Foreign policy.
What are the
Also look at how India has secured access to minerals. Yes, we had a lot of dependency. We still have a lot of dependency on China-controlled supply chains, be it for lithium, be it for copper, be it for most of the key resources. But in the last few years, India has done very well to diversify the supply chains. Look at the uranium deal with Australia, with Canada, with Kazakhstan, and look at the outreach into Latin America. Kabil, which is a public sector unit, has secured a lithium block in Argentina. These were countries which were largely neglected previously. Latin America never got that top focus, except for maybe Brazil.
All this was primarily because of the 123 agreement which India and US signed in 2008, which is considered to be one of the defining moments of India's foreign policy of the UPA first
First
government.
government.
What has been the highlight of this government's foreign policy?
In terms of achievements or agreements,
Yes.
I would say one, the FTAs, as I mentioned, because it's a clear departure from what we had seen earlier. Second would be
But
the
it
defense.
can only be an improvement. So it's not something new that the government has done. Something new.
Something new would be the defense exports. From being an importing nation, today we have become a major defense exporter. Be it Armenia, be it Philippines, now Indonesia as well has signed a deal for BrahMos.
Still, look at the CIPRI data. It still ranks us as one of the biggest importers.
India
of
will
weapons.
remain a big importer because of our military requirements, but the Make in India initiative has played a big role. The indigenous content has gone up significantly. Our defense exports have jumped from hardware to software. Countries like Armenia and Philippines are becoming heavily dependent on Indian supplies. Same with Vietnam as well. So this talks volumes about the policies of India. I mean, achieving this turnaround in a span of 10 years, or let's say 10 to 15 years, is quite marvelous. Because even until 2010, we were heavily dependent on defense imports. And this picture is really changing. And within the armed forces as well, there is a clear prioritization that most procurement has to be indigenous. Or if there is external procurement, it has to be transfer of technology, where the hardware is built in India.
Have we seen that with Rafael?
Not with Rafale, but with Scorpion class of submarines, the new submarine deal with Germany as well, where the technology would be transferred and the equipment would be built in India. So this builds the defense industrial base as well.
Why not with Rafael?
Rafale probably was too
Because
sensitive.
initially, when it was being deliberated between the two countries, there was an element of transfer of technology clause ingrained into the contract, but that has not been done now.
Maybe, see, there were two things with Rafale. One was India's desperation. Our fighter jet squadron have been depleting. We desperately needed replacements. We are still way behind when it comes to achieving the sanctioned squadron strength. So replacing the depleting MiGs was a top focus and priority at that point. Given the threat posed by the China-Pakistan nexus, the JF-17 Thunders, it was an immediate requirement for us. That's why India went in for a government-to-government deal. And also France probably realized they had a leverage, that why share technology when they can convince India to just buy the fighter jets. So transfer of technology ideally should have been a part of it, but it wasn't. But with regard to other deals that you see right now, especially the submarine deals, most of them include a transfer of technology element.
Chetan, I want to ask you about Trump. Is he a bully, and is there any hack to deal with this businessman?
See, Trump is borderline psychopath. Let's be very honest about this. Most experts agree as well that he
Or a
has
clever
he has a
businessman?
personality. I don't think so. He has a personality disorder. He has those megalomaniac tendencies. He likes being pleased, right? And he wants his ego to be massaged all the time. The hack
Why is Mr. Modi ignoring him on world platforms?
there is a clear
There
hesitation.
used to be Howdy Modi, Namaste Trump. Now he seems to be ignoring him, or he doesn't want to interact with him one-on-one.
There is a clear hesitation because there's a fear probably that it could lead to political.
So you're saying
bias.
Prime Minister is fearful of Donald Trump?
Or else why avoid Donald Trump? There have been many instances where there could have been face-to-face meetings, but it has been deliberately avoided.
So one of the most powerful Indian prime ministers ever, you're saying, is afraid of Donald Trump.
It appears so. Because Donald Trump can speak anything at any point in time. You can't control what he says. He has been a motor mouth. And there is a very carefully cultivated image of the prime minister. So there is probably a fear within the ruling establishment that the image could get dented and it could politically be quite expensive. So it could be.
Contrast this with how Mrs. Gandhi went to United States and when she was negotiating the PL 480 scheme, but at the same time she held her ground and she spoke passionately, confidently, sharply in presence of the US presidents. Take Nixon, for example.
Yeah.
But now that's not the case.
1971 was a very different era altogether. The Cold War period there was intense rivalries on both sides. But yes, the way Indira Gandhi stood up at that point when national interests mattered, irrespective of the political consequences, that does deserve praise. I mean, this is irrespective of party politics. Same with Atal Bihari Vajpayee, without worrying about the political consequences, reaching out to Pakistan. These were some standout moments in Indian foreign policy. And I think that boldness is not
Reaching out to
seen
Pakistan after the Kargil,
after Kargil. It was much needed at that point.
it was needed.
Needed to bring back some stability. You can't have two
And
nuclear.
negotiate with the same man who was the architect of the Kargil conflict.
See,
to
sometimes
shut off.
you don't get to choose the leaders who are in power in another country. Irrespective of who's in power, whether you like them or not, you have to engage with them. And that was a point where both had tested their nuclear weapons, both had entered into a conflict. And there was a need to stabilize things, but to bring back normalcy in India-Pakistan relationship.
Was it also pressurized by the United States?
The US has always been an interfering power, not just between India Pakistan, between most of the global powers. You can't take out that element, but there is a point where you have to draw those red lines. Now, take for example.
So was it, what I'm trying to understand is that was it the statesmanship of Mr. Vajpayee, or was he forced to negotiate with the architect of the Kargil conflict by United States and other world powers?
Irrespective of the pressure element from the US, I think Vajpayee had that vision to normalize things with Pakistan, to reach a detente with Pakistan. That approach was always there, or else the Lahore summit would not have yielded the successful results.
And what are the results?
Be it the initiation of the trade, the connectivity that was started, the dialogue that was restarted, that actually helped India
The
Pakistan
cross LOC
navigate.
trade route was also used to smuggle drugs and weapons into Pakistan,
But that is-
into Kashmir.
That is the case with cross-border trade anywhere. You
So
take
how was
India,
it?
Nepal
How was
trade.
it visionary on part of Mr. Vajpayee?
To restore ties with a key neighbor like Pakistan, despite all the issues that you have, despite having just fought a conflict, I think it was a big milestone in Indian foreign policy.
Can you
at that
ever
point.
trust Pakistan?
Pakistan can never be a reliable player.
Then when
You have a
we-
history of
Then
Pakistan going back.
when we talk about talks and terror cannot go together, then why deal with Pakistan at all?
See, you need to maintain some channels of communication.
That
you,
can
you
be,
can't.
That can be through track 2, track 3, track 1.5, but not direct.
No, that would not help you. Let's say there is an escalation. Let's say Pakistan is collapsing internally. The biggest fear is what will happen to their nuclear arsenal. And if you don't have direct engagement with the highest leadership, which includes their army chief,
And if
how else will you
if
de-escalate?
Pakistan is collapsing, how does relationship between the two countries help?
You need a way to prevent a possible nuclear escalation. And for that, you need to maintain channels of communication with the establishment, not with track 1.5.
I think the world should be worried about the Pakistan's nuclear
The
arsenal,
whole world is.
and they would take care of it. Why should India?
But India is the neighbor. India is the one sharing a border with Pakistan.
China would be more worried.
Everyone would be worried. This is the ultimate nightmare.
Then don't you
scenario.
think just because they have a nuclear arsenal and we need to engage with them, that is short-sightedness?
No, I'm not saying engage in friendly relations. I'm not saying go give them a hug each time. No, I'm saying maintain at least communicable channels, so that if things go out of control, because there are a lot of players involved, there are state and non-state actors colluding
Who
together.
will you talk to in Pakistan? Would it be the
It has to be it has to be the army chief, and it has to be the civilian leadership as well.
civilian leadership have no role whatsoever when it comes to at least foreign policy vis-a-vis India?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying both. You need some contacts with the deep state as well, possibly back channel talks, and at the same time with the civilian establishment as well,
Civilian administration for what?
to at least show that India Pakistan can engage with each other, they can talk to each other, to show that there can be some
But the
normalcy.
civilian
which can
government
be-
does not have any decision-making power with respect to India at least. Why talk to them? Why not directly, if at all?
Yeah.
Why not directly talk to the field marshal?
That way, you will delegitimize the civilian government. Yes, it is true that there is a dual power center that exists in Pakistan. But just engaging with the military establishment, bypassing the elected civilian government, would undermine their democracy. And that's the worst
Why
outcome
should
for
we
us.
be worried about that?
Strengthening democracy in Pakistan is the only way, long-term
By that
solution
logic,
for
should
us.
we also get involved in Balochistan?
India might be involved in Balochistan.
You're saying India is.
No, I'm not
involved.
saying India is. Any country worth its salt, right? They would be playing a certain role.
Do you think there is any element of truth that Indian state is sponsoring the
I
PLA?
wouldn't say they would be sponsoring an insurgent group, because we don't have any evidence of that. But definitely we have maintained contacts. For example, Baloch leaders sheltered in Europe, they have been in touch with the Indian establishment. For that you have credible evidence as well. But are we sponsoring extremism? That's a different argument altogether. So there was a time where India would be involved in tit for tat attacks in Pakistan in the 80s. For example, RN Cow, let's say 1970s, had cultivated a very deep network in Pakistan. And let's say in Cowboys of Raw, B. Raman talks about this, that in the 80s, when Khalistan movement was at its peak, that India was engaging in tit for tat retaliations. So right now, are we doing it? Nobody knows that. It would be classified.
You're making very serious claims on this channel.
Maintaining political contact is one thing, but sponsoring extremism is a completely different game altogether.
But you're saying tit for tat
In the
initiatives
80s,
were
yes.
taken.
In the 80s, yes. That did play a big role in subduing the ISI support to the Khalistani outfits.
And let me wrap my head around it and ask you point blank, should India be talking to Pakistan?
We should at least have channels of communication just to prevent any escalations from going out of control. Other than that, we need some changes from the Pakistani side, some commitments, particularly with regard to terrorism and the Kashmir issue as well, without which we should not have any friendly ties. So it's a delicate balance. It's not about being friends or not friends. It's about maintaining a very pragmatic engagement where you have certain channels of communication just to de-escalate, just in case things go out of hand. Otherwise, the policy, the new doctrine that we are seeing, that terror talks cannot go hand in hand, terror trade cannot go hand in hand. I think that is the right approach for now.
And now terror and water cannot go hand in hand. Do you think that stopping waters, going back on Indus Water Treaty is something that we can implement first and then it's going to be successful?
See, India's hand was pushed on this. India never weaponized water until last year. There was a lot of debate about, keeping Indus Water Treaty in abeyance, even during Uri attacks, even during Pahalgam. But India has always taken that mature stand because you can't send out the wrong message that you're not abiding by your treaty commitments. It's not just about India, Pakistan. This could affect your deals with the other nations as well. But now after Pahalgam, I think somewhere that red line was crossed. And India's options also have been quite limited. Apart from the limited military strikes you can carry out, water is one leverage that we can use against Pakistan as a downstream nation. Can we utilize it? The previous mistake was we never fully utilized the allotted potential. Under Indus Water Treaty, the allotted share was never fully utilized on the Indian side. And that is something I think in the last 1 year we're trying to plug. For example, look at the dredging and the desilting activities we have taken up. Some of the projects like Ratle and the others which have been fast-tracked. So this does give India that leverage to show that, okay, water can be a weapon with regard to Pakistan.
What if tomorrow there is an adverse order by World Bank, which is an arbiter on Indus
India
Water
need not be bound by that.
It's an arbiter.
It's an arbiter, but India need not be bound by that. If it really goes against Indian interests, India need not be bound by that.
And you don't think there would be repercussions if we go against it?
As I said, we are living in a chaotic world. We are seeing big powers casting away rules from US to Israel to China. Then if it really matters, if it really comes to that point, India shouldn't hesitate as well.
Then do you think it was wrong on part of the establishment in India to agree to a ceasefire when we had held an upper hand in the conflict?
Probably, see, India felt that our immediate objectives had been achieved, which was to take a direct aim at their terror infrastructure, send out a message to the deep state, which had been done in the first 3-4 days of conflict. But my only issue is with the US playing that role.
Forget about US. Let's assume there was no involvement of United States. Let's agree for a time that it was initiated at the request of Pakistan DGMO. Why agree?
Assuming there was no US involvement, I think India should have probably dragged the conflict a few more weeks or a few more days. Use that leverage to drag Pakistan to the negotiating table. Something tangible should have been achieved. For example, like we did in 1971. A Shimla Agreement, despite some of the failure of the Shimla Agreement, there were some principles which worked in India's favor for a very long time. Something like that should have been pushed for. Because though we had the battlefield advantage, the tactical advantage, nothing eventually came out of it. It's not that there's a guarantee that terror attacks will stop. It's not that Pakistan is committed, they'll not interfere in Kashmir. So at the end of it, what did we gain? And when you look back in retrospect, Pakistan has, as I said, it has become more significant geopolitically ever since Operation Sindoor. And look at the deal they signed with Saudi Arabia, the Mutual Defense Pact, or how closer they've gotten to Donald Trump, or the mediating role with US-Iran conflict. in many ways, this has worked in favor of Asim Munir, in favor of the military establishment. Probably Operation Sindoor was that moment for India where we could have weakened Pakistan considerably, militarily, and pushed them to the negotiating table, drawn some concessions from them.
So that you think is the failure
That should have
of the
been,
government.
yeah.
How would you rate our External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar? The views have been polarizing. Some hold him in high esteem
Yeah.
as the best foreign affairs minister that we have ever had. And some are criticizing him for being just there for optics, where nothing tangible has been gained by India.
Jaishankar has his share of success and failures, just like any foreign minister. Uh, Instead of rating, I would say there has been a good, bad, and ugly side under his term. The good would be how India has appeared to be more proactive when it comes to protecting, let's say, the interests of Indian nationals abroad.
That was always the case. That was always the case.
No, but
even when Ms.
even
Sushma
when
Swaraj
Sushma
was
Swaraj or
minister,
Rishabh
or even
Krishna
before
was
that.
there.
Even some would say the worst foreign affairs minister, Natwar Singh.
Yeah.
During that period also, whenever
No, but
Indians,
you see a renewed attention on the interests of the Indian diaspora abroad, which was missing before, let's say, Jaishankar. Be it their economic well-being with regard to their social security or rescuing Indians from conflict zones. Yes, it has been there before, but you see a scaled-up proactiveness
how
from the foreign
did
ministry.
Dr. S. Jaishankar help in the economic and social security of the Indian diaspora?
Take, for example, the deals that we have secured with Saudi Arabia, with UAE as well, to protect the interests of the Indian workers.
Indian
Or with-
workers go to these countries and their passports are impounded.
Yeah.
That's still a reality.
It is
Nothing
still a
has changed
reality,
on the
but
ground.
that is the issue that we have tried to address at least to some
So
extent.
you're saying we tried to do it, but we have not been able to successfully do it.
Not entirely. The issues still persist with regard to Indian migrant workers, especially the blue-collared workers.
So this is not the success of the foreign affairs minister.
No, I wouldn't see this as a failure because I'll clarify this. With regard to European Union as well, Indian workers used to face a very big challenge there with regard to social security, where they would make the payments, the employer would make the payments for their social security, but they wouldn't be able to withdraw this. And now with the new FTA, we have addressed this particular issue.
Indian
Same with-
mangoes are banned in Europe.
No, but with the FTA, that would be resolved. We would match up with the hygiene and sanitary standards of European market. And India is one of the key mango exporters.
Yes, but not to Europe now. Even Japan has raised issues regarding the quality of mangoes.
See, this is something which we have to deal with internally with our domestic industrial policy, with our quality standards. But when it comes to, let's say, what Jaishankar has achieved, what he has not achieved, there has been a good side. For example, one is the proactiveness on the Indian diaspora issue. Second would be India's more assertiveness in global diplomacy, particularly keeping out European interference with regard to Russia-Ukraine war. In 2022, we faced a lot of criticism from European leaders, European media, and Jaishankar was very open about this, that India is looking after its own interests. Because Europe never
And why
bothers about...
stop import of oil from Venezuela and Iran?
That's my criticism part. The inconsistency which comes up later on with Trump coming into office, I think that is the failure of Jaishankar and the foreign policy establishment.
And the
as
role
a
of
whole.
Dr. S. Jaishankar's son in Observer Research Foundation. Do you agree with that?
There is some concern with regard to how ORF has been functioning. I mean, if you look at the funding sources, their massive funds have come from Reliance Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, even from many foreign ministries, including the US State Department. And there have been these reports in the media, again, unverified reports, that Dhruv Jaishankar, who's in the US, heading ORF in the US, allegedly is playing a much bigger role, interfering with Indian foreign policy interests. And apparently there is some discomfort within the MEA as well, amongst Indian diplomats as well. But how far is it true? Again, we are in no position to verify that.
So what do we believe in then?
Coming to rating Jaishankar,
Not the researched newspaper reports or go by the hearsay?
I think it has to be a mix of both because these reports again have not been picked up by the mainstream media. Right? It has been a set of articles.
There is no mainstream media in India anymore.
Huh.
But you are saying that we should not look at these reports at face
I'm not
value.
saying, not at face value, of course, but there has to
But
be
when
some
the
clear
funding
sign.
has been clearly spelled out in those reports,
But isn't it common in geopolitics for non-state actors like think tanks to play a role?
is it common for the son of an external affairs minister to play the role of a so-called deputy foreign affairs minister in the United States?
That's what I'm saying. That's the problematic element of this. think tanks being involved in foreign policy making is nothing new, but the extent to which they are involved and the sources of funding, or let's say the kind of push they are giving towards a certain direction, that becomes bothersome. And that's where some discomfort has been expressed within the MEA, apparently, according to this report.
You are also on Instagram. You follow the social media trends as well. Prime Minister Modi, always camera friendly, looking into the camera, posing for the
Jaishankar with
pictures.
laser eyes.
Jaishankar with laser eyes. Uh, what have we reduced foreign policy diplomacy to? Just the photo ops, or we need to go beyond photo ops and look at the tangible outcomes from these conferences?
It has to be a mix of both. Outcomes, visibility does matter. What you project in the media does matter. But eventually, the tangible outcomes.
No, my
hold
question
the-
is, are we only catering to the domestic audience and tell them that all is well? You don't have to worry about, we are a Vishwa Guru, we are able to influence and shape the global politics, but in reality, it's completely reverse. And the
that's
opposite.
my main issue with, let's say, under the current establishment, that there appears to be a unwillingness to accept failure at any cost, even when Indian interests have been compromised. Not taking a clear stand, not accepting that, let's say, Trump's policies, for example, denying that outright, and just celebrating the successes. That somewhere dilutes the approach to foreign policy itself. Uh, just playing to the audience, playing to the gallery, which is through social media these days. I think that's where Jaishankar, I mean, it has become a cult driven, a personality driven foreign policy, and which is never good in the long run. You need institution led foreign policy, where MEA is seen as a driver. MEA has maintained that consistency in foreign policy. Now you see repeated U turns here and there, or India rejecting any aspect of failure in foreign policy. That could have long term consequences as well.
Who is, according to you, the best foreign affairs minister that we have ever had?
Uh, Personally, I think Sushma Swaraj, who made Indian foreign policy more proactive, especially reaching out to the Indian community abroad or maintaining very balanced relations with different powers. Even to some extent, though it was a very short term, Indira Gandhi and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Then even under PV Narasimha Rao's regime, the initial 90s after the Cold War era was a fantastic period. Jaishankar to some extent, with regard to just some successes, some of the deals and agreements that have been secured, the Indo-Pacific that we have been driving. But other than that, I think Jaishankar has a mix of both successes and failures.
What is Quad for you? Is it a military alliance or is it just a diplomatic?
India has never seen Quad as a military alliance.
And don't you think that's the failure?
No, I don't think so. Would you like to pick a direct battle with an aggressive neighbor like China? And that's never in India's interest. India has never pursued that relationship with China. Yes, we want to deal with the threats posed by China, but not in a militaristic form like how US was wishing Quad to be. Even Jaishankar spoke about this. He said, look at China's economic strength. It makes no sense. It's not prudent to pick a conflict with a much superior aggressive power. Right?
And don't you think when you openly make these statements, you're giving an alibi to a country like China that they can do whatever they wish to do with India, and then the state of India will not respond?
No, but if you look at the Ladakh clashes,
Look at exactly. That's something that I was referring to.
Yeah.
When the Prime Minister on the floor of the Parliament said that no one has come and we have not lost even an inch of our territory, while there are reports that a significant chunk has been ceded to China.
The issue with Ladakh crisis, the way it was handled, the way it was negotiated, the main issue was the previous patrolling points, which were accessible to the Indian troops, have now been declared as a buffer zone. And the government has not been transparent about this. Till date, all the terms of the agreement have not been made public. It's still confidential. So, yes, the loss of territory, again, it's not that China has occupied the territory, but the fact that you have given up your previous patrolling positions, declared it as a buffer zone, itself makes a big compromise. It marks a big compromise. But look at the tactical wins the Indian army had made. India did manage to stand up to China. At Rezangla, even though China had made deep intrusions, at Rezangla, India managed to turn the table around. It was a very aggressive military strategy, which was lost diplomatically later.
So I think for me, the most aggressive was the Doklam crisis of 2017.
Not entirely, though India stood up at Doklam. You look at the reality now, after the breakthrough that was achieved at Wuhan, most reports indicate China has stepped up its military infrastructure at Doklam. So, what I'm saying
is that was the aggressiveness on part of India to enter Bhutan and shield the Doklam. Whether that led to something tangible later or not, but that was the aggressive attitude.
But that was also a commitment, a treaty commitment with Bhutan to defend the country as well.
And now, when you give these statements that we can't go against China militarily, it's a superior economic power, you're giving them a solid alibi.
See, coming back to the first question, did we ever see Quad as a military alliance? India never believes in joining any military clubs. Quad for us would have been that informal diplomatic group which could have been a counterbalance to Chinese aggression, to enforce a rules-based order, to protect the freedom of navigation. This has been our focus from the very beginning. Even when Shinzo Abe proposed the Asian Security Diamond concept, which is the foundation for Quad, even back then India was very, very clear that any such alliance with, let's say, Japan, Australia, US, would not have a militaristic approach. Because being part of a military club will be counterproductive to India. That would be seen as a very aggressive move by China.
Through your answers, I'm made to believe that you're saying when it comes to two big superpowers of the world, United States and China, India is behaving cowardly.
India is being cowardly.
Yeah.
To some extent, yes. Particularly after Trump has come into office. Because previously India would take a stand
Or do you
against
think
the
the
US.
Great Nicobar project is something through which we can realize a counter to China?
See, India has a host of projects across the Indo-Pacific through which we have been countering China. But has India been acting cowardly with regard to China and US? With regard to US, definitely yes, in the past 1.5 years. Just one example. Look at the current US ambassador, Sergio Gore. He has been given an additional charge and India has not opposed it even one bit. He has been given charge as the special envoy for South Asia and Central Asia, which means Sergio Gore, apart from being the ambassador to India, will also engage with Sri Lanka, with Maldives, with Bhutan, with Pakistan as well, with Central Asian countries as well. The last time such a position was created was in 2009 under Richard Holbrooke.
Yes, that's
The
what I
UPA
was
government
about.
strongly opposed it.
And then he was basically sent as an advisor to Afghanistan.
Only Afghanistan and Pakistan.
Right.
Initially, his mandate was entire South Asia. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, the government put the foot down and pushed Obama administration back. Then Holbrooke's mandate was changed only to Afghanistan and Pakistan. Why are we not seeing that right now? Because in the last 1.5 to 2 years, US has been playing a much bigger role in the Indian neighborhood, be it in Myanmar, be it in Bangladesh, including the Sheikh Hasina protests, be it in Sri Lanka and Maldives. US is trying to take on China directly. And this bypasses Indian role in the region. When we claim to be the regional power and we claim this to be our theater of influence, today you're allowing US to play a parallel game and you're not deterring them, you're not pushing them back.
Then why do you think Mr. Jaishankar has been successful?
No, these are the failures of Jaishankar. That's why I said there are some successes, there are some failures.
These are big failures.
Big
by that
failures.
logic.
The loss of influence in Bangladesh, the inability
Because you
to
played all your
cards
cards
in one
with
party
Sheikh Hasina.
and one leader, and even hosting Sheikh Hasina for that matter. Yes, we have an age-old friendship with Awami League, with Sheikh Hasina's family. And Sheikh Hasina has been a great friend who has
So should she be deported?
not deported. We could have worked out an asylum in some other country, like we have done it with Baloch leaders, for example, in European nations. We had that influence to work with, let's say, Nordic countries, which are more than welcoming to provide refuge and asylum, instead of hosting Sheikh Hasina, because that sent a wrong message to the interim government, to the Jamaat, to the new government, the BNP government under Tariq
To the
Rahman.
larger public in
To the larger public in Bangladesh. You're basically hosting the ousted leader who has been held accountable for war crimes. And what message are you sending out? So that, I think, is a big failure in Bangladesh, across the neighborhood. The neighborhood first policy, which is the most celebrated policy of the Modi government, is today in shambles, at least in most of the neighboring nations. We didn't anticipate the Gen Z protests in Nepal. And we still haven't found a solution for the border dispute with Nepal, which has unnecessarily been aggravated. Right? Kalapani issue could have been resolved. So what's stopping India from finding a solution to that?
So there is no solution to Sir Creek. There can be no solution to Siachen. There is no solution to the boundary issues with Nepal. Our neighborhood is in mess, and we have lost the leadership role in the neighborhood. We are completely absent when it comes to
border issues with Pakistan is largely a result of the colonial legacy, and there's a much complex background to it to find an easy solution. But issues with Nepal are easily solvable. We had a joint expert committee in 1980s which had delineated the border as well. Why not formalize it? Why not resolve the Kala Pani Susta issue? Even now you have a new government in Nepal, a new young leader, creating issues with Kalapani, opposing the Kailash Manasarovar Yatra. I mean, these questions on your territorial sovereignty from a small neighbor like Nepal casts a big question on your leadership role in the region. So why aren't we solving these basic boundary issues, which could have been solved?
When you call them small nations, was it in a derogatory fashion?
Not in a derogatory fashion,
Which
but
goes against the Gujarat doctrine that when we deal with these nations, we don't expect anything in reciprocity. We want to give them as elder brothers.
India has largely followed that, at least since the Gujarat Doctrine. Right? We don't expect immediate reciprocity from our neighbors. We have always been giving, be it in development assistance, the concessional loans that we have provided, disaster management assistance. We don't expect anything immediately in return from them. We have not leveraged that. But let's say with countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, where we have a clear advantage to maintain our influence, why are we losing ground to China? Look at the kind of Chinese investments in Bangladesh or Sri Lanka. Though India has managed to counter the developments in Sri Lanka to some extent, Bangladesh has been a big failure.
One last question, Chetan. Before 2014, the world, according to critics, saw India as a secular nation which values democracy, pluralism. Has that image been dented after 2014?
From a global perspective, definitely yes. Because if you look at the internal developments, let's take the issue of NRC in Assam, illegal migration, or Citizenship Amendment Act. When you try to project your domestic electoral issues externally, this will always have implications. I think one reason why the new government in Bangladesh, the Tariq Rahman government, they're not willing to repair the relations is mainly over the illegal migration issue, where you're branding all illegal migrants to be from one country, from one religion, which has even led to communal riots, where, let's say, a few Northeast insurgents in the past, like Bodos, for example, they used to target specifically the Muslim community. Reports clearly show that they were Indian Muslims, but they would be branded as Bengali Muslims, as illegal migrants from Bangladesh. So, encouraging this sort of polarization on religious lines, which has external implications, it affects your foreign policy, your national interests, or the recent state elections that happened in Assam and West Bengal, following which the BSF has become very aggressive, following a illegal method called border push-ins, where illegal migrants are being pushed back. And again, reports show that most of them are Bengali Muslims. So is this religion-based targeting? These questions have persisted. Even the NHRC, Supreme Court, had asked questions regarding Rohingya issue. Like, why are you blocking Rohingyas? India never has blocked or sent back any refugees who have sought asylum, be it the Tibetan refugees, Bengali refugees in the past, Sri Lankan refugees, or Afghan refugees for that matter. So the government had no solid reply. The reply was, we are not signatory to Refugee Convention. We are not obligated. But why single out Rohingyas when UN says they are the world's most persecuted community? Is it on religious grounds? Because domestically, you know that Rohingya issue has been polarized, right? It has been played for electoral politics. So somewhere it gives that image that yes, India's track record with regard to secularism, with regard to protecting minorities, that image has taken a beating. There are adverse reports coming from UN special rapporteurs, adverse reports from European Union. This, of course, affects your engagement with them as well. With regard to the SAR exercise, UN special rapporteurs recently have issued 3 notices to India. And that harms your image as a Vishwaguru. If you're really projecting yourself as a leader of the world, if you're claiming for a seat at the UNSC, a permanent seat, I think these are the internal issues which need to be tackled. You can't allow your domestic electoral issues to be projected externally.
Thank you so much, Chethan, for joining us. If you have been watching, our guest today was Chethan N., India's foremost educator for international relations, internal security, and disaster management. Do you agree with his views on India's image as a secular power being dented after 2014, or his take on the legacy of Dr. S. Jaishankar and India's diplomacy, wins, hits, and misses? Do let us know in the comment section. And if you find this podcast interesting, subscribe to our channel for more such exciting content. Thank you for watching.